billionaire Republican governor of West Virginia, Jim Justice, is actually getting to the left of Joe Manchin when it comes to COVID relief. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
At the end of the day, really and truly, Poppy, what we need to do is we need to understand that trying to be, per se, fiscally responsible at this point in time with what we've got going on in this country, if we actually throw away some money right now, so what? We have really got to move and get people taken care of and get people back on balance. And I want to work with the Biden administration just like I worked with the Trump administration, and I want us to move forward.
Pretty remarkable.
Very interesting. Here to discuss, Jennifer Holsworth-Karp. She's Democratic strategist, owner of JC Strategies, and Rachel Bovard, Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute, two great friends of the show. It's good to see you guys. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you. Happy snowy morning.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Jen, let me start with you. What do you think it says that the Republican billionaire governor of West Virginia is to the left on COVID stimulus relief of Joe Manchin in this particular situation? And what does that portend for the future of these COVID relief talks?
Well, let's not forget that the good governor was originally a Democrat. He switched to Republican.
Are you going to claim him again, Jen?
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. No, ma'am. No, but I think it portends that this is the direction that the talks are going, and they should go. He's 100% right. Anybody talking about fiscal responsibility now is way lost in terms of this discussion. I think that any Republican or Democrat telling the Biden administration that they feel the need to compromise on the amount that they're giving Americans has totally lost their way. There is no question that Americans are hurting across the country. They need, forget about 2,000. They should be printing $100,000 checks for everybody who was devastated by this pandemic. So I think that Governor Justice is right on the money, and I think it should have an outsized effect on the conversation.
I mean, Rachel, I do want to say, just to put into this conversation before we go too far down the road of being like, Jim Justice is amazing, that he stands accused of bilking the government of like $11 million for his own personal companies when he is already an incredibly wealthy person. So I just want to put that on the table in terms of Jim Justice being a good actor here. But look, I think he's speaking accurately to the situation for a lot of West Virginians. This is one of the poorest states in the country. You've got a disproportionate number of people who are really struggling. And so it's quite striking to hear a Republican say like, okay, so you waste some money. Who cares? It's more important just to get people relief right now when they need it.
So I think his comments are really touching on something I've observed sort of as Republicans attempt to deal with this crisis, which is the fact that, for 40 years, we've had one theory of government, and that is government is bad. And when we get power, we have to drown it in the bathtub. Like that is literally all we know. And so I think we confront a situation like this where the government actually has to do something, right? It's a national crisis of which the government has partial responsibility, and we flail. We have no idea how to address it because we actually have no frame of thought. We don't have any frame of reference for how you get government to act. And so I think you're really seeing this right now when we talk about sort of fiscal responsibility versus government spending. There is a line here. There is a way to do this that still, I think, maintains the principle that, big government has problems just like big business does. Jim Justice is an example of this, right? You have corruption, you have waste, you have all these things. You have to have oversight. But at the same time, this is now the appropriate time for the government to step in and help the people that they've really put on the sidelines in a lot of ways by forcing them out of the economy.
Rachel, can you just to expand a bit on this? Because I actually think it's a fascinating dynamic where the governors of red states, like you have governors of red states being like, no, like actually we need state and local bailout like really bad. Like our cops are about to go out without paychecks. We are not going to have fire departments. Like, and in many ways, people defunding the police are the deficit hawks in the Republican Party. And so just talk about that difference with you have GOP heads of government in states being like, no, we need a lot more and we not need it now. But some of the most ardent deficit hawks in Congress actually even come from swing states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, Toomey and Ron Johnson being an example. Like, how does this dynamic play out?
Well, it's where ideology meets reality, and there are going to be electoral consequences to it, I think. I mean, you're already seeing Pat Toomey step down. I think because he realizes, like Rob Portman to some extent, that this theory doesn't really meet where the base is anymore. And so you're going to have to, I think, move forward and address this. Because again, the Republican Party has been controlled by this libertarian ethos that says, again, the only thing you can do with government is drown it in the bathtub, where conservatives have always said government is fine, it should just be limited. And that's the tension right now. And nobody knows how to talk about it. That's the really concerning thing, is that we've made the issue so toxic for Republicans that they have one speed and they really just can't, relate or react to what's actually happening on the ground. And so you're going to see leadership, I think, from unexpected places. I think, before January 6th, Josh Hawley was really stepping up here. He may still yet, but I think you're going to see Tom Cotton and others really start to take the rhetorical and policy leadership necessary to get the Republican Party away a little bit from that sort of Koch-funded,
Yes.
no government, all government is bad, because that just isn't where the base is anymore. I don't think it ever was.
I wish I was as hopeful as you about it, Rachel, because now would be a prime time for them to jump into the fray. And we don't see them speaking up really whatsoever, certainly not in favor of Biden's plan so far. Jen, in terms of Joe Manchin, do you think that this is kind of an indication that he is, I've looked at the poll numbers. We know that he is out of step with West Virginia in terms of the economic needs that they have right now. Do you think that that's in a way a hopeful sign that he can actually be moved? Because he has already been moved somewhat on the direct checks themselves. And there's a big, but he's still out there saying that, like, oh, this needs to be more targeted, and he's worried about spending too much money, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that justice is kind of a sign that maybe Manchin can be brought along to the larger price tag of this stimulus bill?
I think the short answer is yes, but this also, as Rachel said, in the broader Republican Party, this is a divide. But I think you're seeing the divide play out with, ironically, Governor Justice's comments on the left about fiscal conservatism with a Democrat like Joe Manchin, and what the broader progressive movement has been trying to say all along. It has always been a conversation about how you present it to the voters. And with Governor Justice saying what he did, I think it is going to move Joe Manchin, because even though Joe Manchin has to come back and answer to the Democratic caucus in terms of what he's speaking to his voters about, I think you see folks like the Biden administration sort of bypassing the senator to speak directly to his voters about what should happen to get a better view. Because I don't necessarily think that Senator Manchin has his fingers on what West Virginia actually needs. And this is a great conversation starter to make sure that we move in the direction that not just the Democratic Party, but that American voters are moving. One of the biggest reasons Donald Trump lost in terms of the election, although there's a different conversation about how the Republican Party did broader in the House and Senate, is because of his handling of the pandemic, both the actual pandemic, but the economics behind it. And I think that the governor is speaking to it in exactly the way that West Virginia voters want to hear. And Manchin would be smart to follow.
Yeah, I think that's right. All right, guys, stick with us. We're going to have more Rising right after this.